This year's Lantern Rite is called the Exquisite Night Charm, and the Genshin devs have somehow done it again. It had a different theme with music being a core part of the story, and it did not disappoint. A lot of the characters and stories that really went into the music theme of the Lantern Rite was something special, and it made the Lantern Rite of this year made it into one of the most memorable experiences of the new year. The story makes itself quite unique quite quickly, with a surprise focus on the Ardori Festival, an event we've heard about since 2.3, but never really materializing. But in this update it does, and it beautifully goes into the story of the Lantern Rite seamlessly. I'm surprised the quest didn't have a main character to focus on like previous year's Lantern Rite. Mr. Dvorak was set up as our NPC that we're gonna be focusing on that will get involved into the story, but this time he didn't play any part in the story after the first act. If anything, he was the first big setup for the arc, but not really its main driver. But it has to be everyone that was the main driver for this arc, not just one person. Where most events feature the main character from beginning to end, the quest focuses on its theme of music, made for a story that focused on the wider range of Liwa's characters instead of a set group. The quest featured Mr. Dvorak and Yao Yao in the first part, our new character, then Ganyon Kiching in the second, and Huto in the final. There are also other characters who appeared, but these are the more prominent. I loved how no character took too much time from another, and they all had their time to shine. One in particular really stands out as the most memorable, from Mr. Zhongli. In this year's Lantern Rite, Exquisite Night's Charm, we have our first canonical interaction between two Archons, between Venti and Zhongli. I love how they interacted as strangers, but kept shooting daggers at each other. It was hilarious to see them interact, and the moment that followed with Xiao being really uncomfortable with them is fantastic. And the moment where he talks to the Traveler alone, it showed his growth as a character throughout Genshin's story. It was pretty pleasing to the heart to see him grow. The Traveler having some alone time with Xiao, and their talk was satisfying as it didn't feature Paimon, and it made it more intimate between them. And the end portion with Xiangling felt like a good way to end things. The Lantern Rite had a major focus on music as its core theme. It tied into every character who appeared in its story in unique ways that made learning about music in Genshin's context intriguing. Tying into the story is our first canonical look at many Adepti. From the human form of Cloud Retainer, looking so fitting for a design, a young Madame Ping, pretty surprising to have this character confirmed from back in 2.2 as a young Madame Ping. And our first look at the God of Dust herself, Guizhang. There have been many mentions of her in Genshin's lore, particularly Liu's, but never a good look at her design or her character, but now we do, and she's adorable. Her design is simple but regal, and it really gives her a different aura compared to the other Liyue characters. Early on, the quest set up the mystery Fairy Lady, a legend that dates back to the roots of Mr. Dvorak, a character that we meet in the first act, and it was really satisfying seeing his whole story play out, and his whole energy throughout the quest was so good. It gave him a very different vibe from every other character in the story. From the playable characters to Paimon, it gave him one of the most, well, in my opinion, a lovable character that didn't seem too overbearing. And a lot of its story that led into the revelation of the Fairy Lady as Madame Ping in the end was so satisfying, and the whole moment in the concert segment in Act 2 was perfect. Another plotline from the past that I wasn't expecting to be relevant in this year's Lantern Rite was the Ardori Festival. We all kind of knew that it was going to be music-centric, but I never expected this. And I love that it actually did happen, and it looks like it's going to be happening more often. And the performance in the end with Xinyan and Hu Tao was exquisite, and it was pretty surprising to see it happen. This year's Lantern Rite somehow surpasses the previous year's Lantern Rite without even having a big cutscene in the end like last year's. It's amazing the growth in the writing compared to last year's. It makes me excited for the newer versions of previous year's events, like the Ardori Festival or the Windbloom, and how that's gonna be something special this